It is on the president's Twitter feed right now. He posted it, a clip of himself from about 10 years ago, fake wrestling and fake punching a CNN logo on the floor. No context or commentary, just a hashtag. It's just the latest in a string of week-long personal attacks, name-calling, and cheap shots at media figures, and of course the news industry in general. And it's just a few days before what may be the most critical event in America's foreign policy since the end of the Cold War. We've got Brian Stelter here. He's our senior media correspondent, also the host of CNN's Reliable Sources. We also have a panel of experts on hand, including a Trump biographer, a legal analyst, and a conservative radio host. We will get to all of you gentlemen shortly, but let's start with Brian Stelter. Brian, we would love to be talking about the Supreme Court decision that partly went the president's way on the travel ban, the visit from Moon Jae-in, the South Korean leader, the House passage of a key part of his illegal immigration program that cracks down on sanctuary cities. There's also the trip to Germany in a few days where he'll get to meet Vladimir Putin face to face. You're a media expert, though, and we're talking about this tweet because there's no way you can look away from it. It's a video posted by the President of the United States of America of him violently pounding the logo of a news network.
Perhaps his fantasy comes to life here. I know some viewers are wondering, what the heck is he doing in a WrestleMania video? Well, years ago, the president would appear with his friend Vince McMahon in these WWE broadcasts. Once in a while, as we see on Twitter, he would actually get in and do some of the fighting. Of course, all fake, all staged. But here we have, many years later, the video of now President Trump doing this kind of fighting, and of course showing the other figure being a CNN logo. Listen, it's strange, it's amusing to some people, maybe it's clever. It's also disturbing, and we have seen mostly Democratic lawmakers coming out and condemning this. We've seen journalism advocacy groups calling this out, saying this seems to be encouraging violence. CNN's statement says this network will continue to report the facts, continue to report on this presidency, continue to do our jobs, and we hope President Trump will start doing his job. So pretty strong words from the company about this video, about this choice to post it. This apparently came from a pro-Trump message board a few days ago. So this was something that someone produced maybe at home on their computer. Then somehow, we don't know how, made its way to the President of the United States. I think a lot of folks are wondering, is this presidential behavior? Is this appropriate for the president? And is it appropriate to be shared on Twitter? Well, we've asked Twitter for comment about whether this violates the company's terms of service, because it does have rules forbidding harassment and hateful content, incitement of violence. However, the company, after many hours, did conclude that this was okay, that it does fall within the company's policies. I tell you, though, there are Twitter users that have gotten banned or suspended for much less than what the president posted today.
That's right. It seems, though, like the president is trying to goad us. He's trying to pick a fight. He's trying to get journalists to become overly emotional and get into an argument with him. Why do you think that is?
I think that's a very good point, and I think it's incumbent on journalists not to stoop to his low level. When he has low standards, we've got to keep having high standards. When he wants to talk solely about the press and why he thinks the press is fake, we've got to keep being real, as we know we are, and as our audience mostly knows we are. But he is tapping into extreme resentment of the media among some of his fans. Not among all Trump supporters, but among the most loyal, the sort of the hardcore base of Trump supporters out there. There's been an anti-media narrative for many years that he has tapped into. And I would argue, as you were describing important stories all around the world, challenges this president faces, his delegitimization of the media is also a big story. Whether it's him attacking the New York Times or the Washington Post or the cast of Morning Joe, today it happens to be CNN. He has different targets on an almost daily basis, but he is trying to tear down news outlets that try to report on him fairly. That is a big deal. It does have corrosive effects for our country. There is damage that has to be repaired in the future because of his anti-media attacks. And today is the most recent example that happens to involve CNN.
All right, Brian, please stay with us. We want to bring in the rest of our panel. Joining us now, CNN contributor and Trump biographer Michael D'Antonio, CNN political commentator and the host of The Ben Ferguson Show, Ben Ferguson, and CNN legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Michael Zeldin. Gentlemen, we thank you all for joining us. Ben, just last night, the president tweeted out that his tweeting is modern-day presidential. Yeah. So he's posting this doctored video of him wrestling with a news organization presidential?
Yeah. Look, I think it's a little bit fun. I think it's pretty funny, actually. And I think that some people are taking this just a little bit too seriously, when the reality is it's pretty clear that the president is not a big fan of us at CNN. I also think that he was referring to a story that he feels like it was a hit piece on him that a couple people had to resign over. And so he decided after he saw it to tweet it out. I don't think this is inciting violence. I think that people that are trying to imply that somehow this is inciting some sort of big violence are stretching a little bit here. The fact is, this was a tweet from the president. Would I have sent it? No, I wouldn't have sent it. Is this Donald Trump's style? Yes. Is he going to stop? The answer is no, he's not going to stop. But let's also put this into perspective. This clip also shows the president in a pretty funny light when he was doing fake wrestling. So before you act like it's over the top or this is inciting violence, remember, this is showing Donald Trump doing something that was pretty funny at the time as well. I think everyone needs to just take a deep breath,
he's the president
relax
now.
a little bit. I agree, but he's a different type of president. I think that's very clear. And this is something that is a little bit humorous. I don't think it needs to be taken as such a intense thing as
I'm
many
glad
are
you're
trying to make it
laughing,
out to
Ben.
be.
There's some CNN staffers that are pretty nervous on a day like today. We've seen some of our colleagues posting on Twitter about their concerns, asking the president not to do something like this. Listen, I agree with you that people should not overreact to every crazy presidential tweet, but this stuff can have consequences.
There's also a history there, Ben. I mean, the president did tell supporters in rallies to punch protesters in the face. As a reporter for reporting from a Trump rally, I have had all kinds of things yelled at me that I can't say on TV. There seems to be a pattern here of very heated rhetoric. Is it the right thing at this moment of very raw feelings between both parties for him to be tweeting something like that out? And all the other things that he's tweeting about journalists, too.
Look, I've worked on campaigns before, and my rule with Twitter or any type of social media is, was it worth it or is it worth it? I don't think these tweets are worth it because it takes away from the legislative agenda of the president, and that's ultimately the reason why the majority of the people that voted for him. They want him to get things done, and this takes away from that narrative. Let's also be clear. He said he wished he could punch that guy in the face and laughed about it when he was talking about the protesters. Both sides take a lot of heat. Go look at my Twitter feed after any time I'm on TV, and I take some of the most vile heat of anybody because I'm a conservative. That's just part of the deal when you go into the reality is now people are going to trash you if you're a journalist, if you're a commentator, if you're the president. This president posts things fighting back sometimes. I'm not saying that I would do it, but I also think in this one instance, this video, I think people are reading way too much into this and trying to make this a bigger deal than it really is.
Can I
add
something? Sure.
Go ahead.
I'd like to add something because I think that framework for analyzing it is just flat out wrong. It was probably not libelous for the President of the United States to say that President Obama wiretapped him, and it probably wasn't obstruction of justice when he said that Comey better hope there were no audio tapes, and it was probably not some sort of violation of the rights of Scarborough and Nikki in an extortion sense when he tweeted out that. But these things, and it wasn't, this wasn't incitement in and of itself, but when you bundle these things together, when you aggregate all these tweets together, you have to look at this in legal terms as abusive, as an abuse of office. And so I think that trying to say, well, this one tweet doesn't equal incitement, or this one tweet doesn't equal extortion, is just the wrong way of looking at these things. These are a package of tweets that create a narrative that is abuse of power in legal terms. And I think that at some point,
it's not abuse of power.
He'll have to be. It's an abuse of office, and it is something that will have to be looked at some point, either by Congress or by the special prosecutor, because it just can't go on. And I'm surprised actually that
Twitter let me get this straight.
Let me just finish 1 second. I'm surprised that Twitter doesn't see this package as an abuse of their terms of use and doesn't deactivate his account.
This is Michael D'Antonio. Let's bring Michael D'Antonio into the conversation. Michael, I want to read you something that Maureen Dowd wrote in her latest New York Times editorial. She writes, quote, "Before he got to D.C., Trump was used to media that could be bought, sold, and bartered with. He is not built for this hostile environment, and it shows in his deteriorating psychological state. You have shadowed the president pretty closely for a biography. What do you make of that?
Well, I think Morning Dad is correct, and so is Howard Stern about 6 months ago when he said that he was concerned that the president would suffer under the microscope and the withering criticism that all presidents receive. This is a different kind of president, and the way that he's different is that he's wholly unprepared for the office. He had no experience prior to running for president other than marketing essentially himself. And what he does now is continue to market himself in the face of a legislative agenda that's stalled. Now he's going off to meet with Vladimir Putin, and he's promoting a doctored video of a fake display of his athletic prowess. You know, it gets so meta that it's almost ridiculous. And it's also kind of a sign of his insecurity because he's following a number of presidents, whether you're talking about George Bush or President Obama, or even the example of President Clinton, who was an avid runner. He's probably the least physically fit man to be in the White House since Eisenhower. He's going off to meet with Putin, who's extremely robust and masculine and demonstrates this all the time. And I think it's a very bad thing for him to be doing this kind of symbolic gesture as he's going off to represent our country.
Can we
Ben,
just
I know you're itching
recap?
to jump in.
Yeah. Let's just recap where we've gone in the last, I don't know, minute and a half. There's going to be an investigation to the stability of the president because of a tweet that deals with an old video of him doing fake wrestling. There is, well, that's what he was implying. That was he was saying special prosecutors at some point with all of these tweets are going to have to look at. Tweeting is not against the law, so let's make that clear. Now you have people that are saying, well, I'm worried about the stability of the president, and he's obviously not physically fit. You're now looking at, again, a wrestling joke tweet that took 8 seconds, and now you're telling me that he's now physically not fit and is somehow deteriorating before our very eyes.
Ben, we're very short on time. We're very short on time, but I do want to ask Ben one quick question. Ben, we've got North Korea threatening a nuclear attack on the United States. We've got Russia encroaching in Ukraine. We've got the mess in Syria. We've got a healthcare overhaul that is stalled. We've got an array of problems. How do these tweets help the president get anything done?
Look, this is what I said earlier. I asked the question when I talk to political people before they tweet anything, is it worth it, or was that tweet worth it? I don't think it helps push forward your legislative agenda because it allows people to talk about something outside of what.
So you think he should stop doing it?
Law. I think he should dial back the Twitter a little bit because I think it takes away. He had two big accomplishments when the first tweets went out against MSNBC. One of them was Kate's Law, which overwhelmingly the majority of Americans were in favor of. It got lost because people got to focus on a tweet instead. So the question is, you got to ask yourself is, was that tweet worth it? I would say the answer is no, it's not, because he has been getting some pretty good things done, including the fact the Supreme Court at 8 o'clock on the same night allowed part of his travel ban to keep Americans safe to go into effect. That was also lost because of a tweet. But look, there are also people that are overplaying this. The fact that people are talking about his physical appearance or if he's fit enough to be president, literally physically fit because of a tweet, is insanity.
Well,
to be fair, he has. We are just out of time, but we do appreciate the perspective. I will say this, though: the president has launched quite a few attacks based on physical appearance and physical fitness before.
Right,
but we got to leave it there.
To say that he's not physically fit because of a tweet is insane.
Well, Ben Ferguson, Michael Zeldin, Brian Stelter, Michael D'Antonio, we do appreciate the time, but we are very, very short on it, so we have to leave it there. Gentlemen, thank you again for joining us. Enjoy your Independence Day weekend.